Every character, location, or experience you've read about in my crime fiction novels holds a piece of reality. I'm Helen Taylor. Welcome to the story behind my stories, the video podcast where crime fiction meets my authentic experience. Here, we delve into the real life inspirations and intimate stories that shaped my novels. Discover how my everyday encounters, adventures, and travels translate into tales as gripping as they are genuine. The story behind my stories goes behind the words on the page to reveal the backstory that inspires my writing. Hit follow or subscribe and ensure you're part of this journey. Hi, welcome to episode 7 of the story behind Leith or Leith Hill. So, we've talked about the cycle racing and we've talked about the dogs in Leith or Leith Hill. So, as you know, I pride myself on the authenticity of my characters and particularly the locations or the events that my books are set in. And so I don't want to give too much away about the book, but the book does bring in some domestic violence and infidelity and lesbian relationships. And so you may be wondering, if she writes authentically from her own experience, what authority do I have to write on those three things? And so today we're going to cover that off. We'll see how we go on this, but yes, I do have an inkling of experience, if not a lot of experience. And as I have with other things in my other books, it's the emotional crux that I take and either put in an alternate situation or exaggerate or something like that, so that I use my experience, the core of that experience or certain feelings I had in that experience, to be able to show that in the book. So, for example, if we go back to tie-dye, I went out to Thailand because a friend had an accident and it was a country I never wanted to go to. I was very uncomfortable. I was comfortable travelling, but not to Asia. And I used that to give Goodwin that same experience, same feel, etc. When he went out to Thailand. So, let's start with the lesbian relationship, as that's probably going to be the quickest. I class myself as straight, and I'll apologise here and now if I don't get the terms right or the being known as, or want to be seen as a certain sexuality, etc. I just think that we all have times when we might either want to experiment or do experiment. And I class myself as straight. I am straight, but I did have one brief lesbian relationship a long time ago in my early 20s. And that is my experience of being with a woman. Now, in Leith Hill, I don't talk about the sexual side of being with a woman. I talk about it's just there is a little bit, but it's not graphic sexual side. It is two women having a relationship, and there is a married lesbian couple in the book. I don't have any experience of that, although I've had my best friend when I rode. She came out to me then, and she had just met a woman. And when I first had Lauren, they came to visit, and they were looking at having kids too. And when I was in my teens, I was friends with a lesbian couple. So, and I don't know how old people listening to me here might be, but that was not as accepted and not as visible back when I was in my 20s. We're talking 30 years ago. This was way before we even turned into the 2000s. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that I've worked with various women who are lesbians, gay, bi. So I have some peripheral experience, and I have a one-off, very brief encounter. But then I have experience of love, and as far as I'm concerned, whether it's two men, two women, a man and a woman, love is love. It isn't different depending on your sex. The sex might be different, but the feelings not. So it is from that basis, and my whole life experience of women in relationships, whether that be with another woman or with a man, and then just sort of looking how that might manifest in a relationship, a sexual relationship, a marriage, a partnership like that, and using that. So that's a bit of authentic honesty for you there, that I had that experience. And I would say when I was younger, I had more friends that were like that than I do now. Yeah. But what led me to that relationship is now what I'm going to discuss more with the infidelity side of things. So I can't promise you I'm not going to get emotional in this one, because this is very personal. But I also now feel I've worked through it, so it isn't as personal. But that doesn't mean that I cannot, or I don't pull up those feelings in order to write that, or work off the basis of how I felt previously to be able to imagine or write how somebody would feel if someone that they were in a relationship was unfaithful to them. Um, so it started for me, I can honestly say that infidelity has probably been the cause of every breakup of every relationship that I've had until my current one. Yeah, everyone. My first, well, no, not everyone, but there has always been another party in it, whether that has been an actual infidelity then, whether it was emotional infidelity, or whether there was a connection that within a very, very short time of my relationship with them breaking up, they were with somebody else. And sadly, on most of those occasions, it was my friend. So, my first relationship wasn't my first relationship. I went away on holiday, and when I came back, he didn't want to be with me anymore. Having been talking about getting engaged before I went away, we were young, 16. And then I started dating Chris. Now, Chris will come into the domestic abuse bit, which we may not get to this week, and we'll do next week. But and I have a vivid memory of dropping my new boss for my Saturday job at home after coming out. She was from New Zealand, and she'd not been in the UK long, and she was a manager at the clothes shop that I worked in on a Saturday. And we became friends, and I invited her out one night. And then when I left her, I dropped her home, Chris walked her to the door, and I looked in my rearview mirror to see them snogging on the doorstep. So that was my first case of infidelity. But I was young. It's never right. Never right. But I was young, and the feelings, whilst at the time are as strong as you ever think they're going to be about somebody, they don't have the depth that lived experience, time together, ups and downs together grow into. But the kicker one, really, I suppose, was my marriage. So I met Dave not long after splitting up with Chris, and I moved to university when we'd been together a year or so. I went off to uni, and he came too. And in my second year, we got a place outside of uni. We rented a place together, rather than me living with other students in like a shared house, we rented a house because he was working. And then at the end of my second year, we bought a house, a maisonette in Woking. And then at the end of my third year, as I went back to do my final year, that September, we got married. And we lived in this cul-de-sac with, there were 4 of us couples that were all met up one evening, and I was taking the dog Muttley for a walk, and Mark was outside having a drink. When I came back, Nancy, who lived in the maisonette above us, she was out having a drink. We got chatting. Partners came home. Mandy and Andy, that lived next door on the ground floor from Mark and Kate, they started chatting with us, and we became a little gang, and every Friday was close knit. We spent a lot of time together outside of that time too, but every Friday was close knit. And we'd all meet out for a drink in outside, and then we'd call pizza, or we'd do a barbecue, because we were right at the end of the cul-de-sac. And I became very close with Nancy and Kate. Nancy was married to Paul at the time. Kate was married to Mark. And there was Mandy and Andy were married to each other. And me and Dave. And so we'd been doing this for a year or so. We got married in September. They were all really key at the wedding and the reception afterwards, because they were, we lived closely together, and we also were close friends. And it was sort of that sort of community closeness that I used a little bit in Leith or Leith Hill, the sort of interconnecting dog walking in the same place on Leith Hill, etc., to do that. And so, as I say, I got married in September. Now, we'd been together 5 years when we got married. And 2 days before I sat the finals of my degree, in the spring of the following year, Dave told me he was leaving me. And I knew he was leaving me for Kate, but he wouldn't admit that. I didn't find out until a little bit later that actually at Christmas, just after Christmas, January, we'd been over to my mum and dad's for a family do, and my dad had pulled Dave aside and asked him how he'd been having an affair with Kate. And the particular weekend before my finals, Dave was supposed to be going over to my sister's to help remove a bathroom, and he didn't turn up. He'd gone to work or something, and my dad came over, and unbeknownst to me, when my mum and dad left, my dad had gone round to where he knew Kate lived, because her and Mark had split up then. And he went knocking on his door, on her door. He got the wrong house. But she lived a few doors up from a pub, and his van was parked in the pub car park. So my dad knew he was there. He knew he was having an affair with Kate. And he didn't he didn't get the right door. I don't know what would have happened if he had of, but he didn't. And when Dave came home that night, I think that was when I had it out with him. And he said he was leaving. Refused to say that there was anything going on with Kate, but I knew there was. I believe, and as my dad did, that he'd been having an affair with her since very soon after us getting married. We had sex on our wedding night and we never had sex again. And there's a whole other load of stuff tied up with that. A lot of insecurities on my side, and the things going on. But fundamentally, he'd been having an affair with Kate. We got married in September. My dad brought it up with him in the January. I think it was probably the November. I believe in the December, after she had left Mark, Nancy pulled me aside, I think around the Christmas time, and said that she had seen Dave and Kate sat on a park bench, and she didn't believe it was just friendly sat on a park bench chatting. So she maybe saw more but wanted to spare my feelings. I don't know. I knew in my heart it was happening too. It was only Nancy telling me that made me have to face that and bring it up with him. But I remember Kate would be round because she didn't have anybody else, and I would go to the toilet and I'd open the door again as quietly as possible and almost jump round the corner because the sight line then was to the sofa, and expect to catch them out. So I wasn't oblivious, but it was in trying to save my relationship and my marriage, and the fact that we hadn't had sex since our wedding night, that I then used. Kate had come on to me a couple of times, and I then chose to respond with Dave there, so that I was hoping that would reignite, do something. And I don't know whether they were both just having a laugh at me, or whether that triggered the relationship with them. This was around the March time, so was well after my dad believing he was having the affair, and Nancy believing it, and me myself being suspicious of it. But I don't know if they were having an affair before then, or if that triggered the affair, him seeing her naked with me. He never joined in. I think it scared the hell out of him. But, so that was my experience of infidelity, and my first experience my first experience. I don't. It doesn't upset me now, as you can tell. In the way it completely devastated me back then. That is hindsight, growth, experience. I don't know. I do know I would not be the person I am now if I had stayed in a relationship with Dave. But that doesn't change the pain or the hurt that you feel when somebody chooses somebody else over you when you are supposed to be their choice. So I'm going to leave that there today and pick it up again next week in the last episode of the story behind Leith Hill.